Okay. We're in business. Hello, Norma. I don't really have a plan for this evening, so we can call it a question and answer thing. But I'm also open to topics. But if nothing else, I would talk about what was on my mind today, which was, which is, I suppose, and I like to think about history. I like to think about history, and I like to think about the commonalities between us and them, right? So, what I want to deduce, one of the things that I'm very curious about, are imperatives or common rules between us and them. But also how those connect to things like, the wilderness and nature, because if you follow my account, you'll know that I'm pretty interested in that as well. But specifically the lack of distinction between those two, because I apply the deterministic lens a lot, where I find that the environment almost determines human outcome. and human outcome determines natural courses, of course. I think all of us can agree on that. Like I said, but shoot for topics that we can talk about, but I'll ramble about that for a little while. So, one of the biggest questions on my mind when it comes to history is how we got to where we are. Specifically, the new questions that we have to ask in our epoch. And maybe you are all familiar with some of these new questions. For instance, what we carry from the past would be somebody like Karl Marx, who has a lot to say about his period, about the period of time that he comes from. He says we should advocate for workers' rights, we should advocate for an international workers' union. Those are imperatives to him. Those are unconditional rules that everybody should abide by. That's all well and good. That's totally fine. However, when we've taken that imperative and we've dragged it into the present, the environmental side begs us to ask different questions. What do I mean by that? Like, for instance, we have to think a lot more about ecology now. We have to think a lot more about the wilderness. We have to think a lot more about our connection with nature, our effect on nature. And as we carry into this present epoch, what we find is that old solutions don't solve those problems. So, us being Westerners, maybe, we're accustomed to tradition, we're accustomed to filial piety, we're accustomed maybe to the Catholic tradition of appealing to the past, and we say, oh, there must be some answer with our ancestors, there must be some answer with, like, these old traditions, like, well, if I'm Catholic, what do the Catholics say? I'm not, but I'm just saying, like, if somebody could make that, or like, hey, I'm a Marxist. I'm not a Marxist, but hypothetically, someone could say, I'm a textbook Orthodox Marxist. What does Marx speak about on ecology? Well, the truth is he doesn't. And the truth is that he can't, because his time and his period of we'll say, like, his material condition, we'll call that a period, right? His material condition begged him to ask certain questions. And he answered those questions, I think, very well for the time that he lived in. We tried those out. They didn't work so well. Maybe you agree, maybe you disagree. But my point is that when we try those things out, they either work or they don't work. I mean, we change and we adapt. There's no point at looking at the old newspapers, trying to get today's information. Right? Does that make sense? Yeah. I think that's a good way to put it. I think that if I gave you an article to read and you looked it over and you said this makes no sense, I need more information, I need more context. This article, frankly, is flowery, it's wordy. My solution would not be then to print out the same article and give it back to you and say, here's another one. It's the same one. It doesn't answer the question. So that's the way that I look at history. That's the way that I think all of us are kind of forced to look at history now, because of this strange epoch that we find ourselves in, this strange material condition. So, okay, why? Why is that practical? Why does that matter? Why is that worth giving our attention to? Well, frankly, I think because we do. I think, well, that's kind of a cop-out. But, but I think the fact that we have so many people is kind of like the Mao Zedong quote where he says, let 100 flowers bloom, where we have all of these different schools of thoughts. We have all these different people trying out all these different systems and, policymakers. People want to make new political parties. Think of like 2019 Politigram. I think that in and of itself is proof enough to me that it's necessary. I think the material condition, this overarching rule, this imperative that encompasses us and nature and weaves us together, I think that is what pushes us forward to have to ask these questions, But let me give you a more practical example, because this is kind of the stuff, like I'm all for the flowery, I'm all for like the logical stuff, but I think it's more important to focus on the practical, to make it worth our while, really. Because that's what somebody like Marx would say too. Okay, let's use another example. Let's say like Adam Smith, the two figureheads of the past 200 years. Karl Marx for his Marxian socialism, for communism, and Adam Smith, of course, for progressing past mercantilism as it wants to blossom into capitalism. So what they wanted to offer, kind of like what I was saying, they want to offer the practical as well, for the working man. So the types, I mean, really, like, and what I want to hand this off to you guys. What I am so curious about, like that quote I was saying, let 100 flowers bloom. When I ask that to anybody else, to other people, what I'm curious about is how the ghost, that's what I call it. That comes from Hegel, who comes before Marx. Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel talks about how there's a ghost that encapsulates all of human spirit and guides it towards a common denominator, guides it towards a common goal. He uses the word telos. And so what I postulate then, what I posit, is that each period's defined by its own telos, right? And then the sums of those telos, plural, I don't know what that would be because it's Greek, it's the process thereof that is the goal. Yeah, yep, we're talking about Geist. Cool. But again, okay. Like I mentioned, it's easy to get flowery about it. But for instance, one of the questions that I want to answer, you guys will probably know if you're familiar with the content that we've talked about before, is the question of food and of food sovereignty, which is specifically a problem that we today deal with in a much different way than in any other period of history. And that's a question that can only be answered by us in our material condition. Like I said, we can be handed down ideas. We do inherit phases of the Geist. But truthfully, of course, let 100 flowers bloom. Let 100 new ideas take hold. Let the best one win. That's the way that I see it. Because that's the telos anyway. That's the way that the telos identifies itself. That's the way the telos, that's what each individual comes to on their own. That's the process of becoming an adult. That's the process of becoming an artist. That's the process of becoming that allows us to be born insofar as we leave a legacy. So, of course, the only people who leave legacies are the only people who are passing on torches, and everybody else kind of falls by the wayside. This is just, for lack of a better term, I wouldn't want to use the term Darwinism, but there's an aspect there in the fact of we can communicate and understand each other if we say it that way. But again, practically, for us, the questions that we have to ask, like I was saying, we have to talk about food. We have to talk about the accessibility that we have to energy, to electricity. We have to talk about the access that we have to something like healthcare and our relationship to it. So, for example, we could pull from history, we could use historical precedent, but it's almost the phenomenon where as soon as you touch it, you taint it, because you can look at historical precedent, you can look at how the ancients did it if you want to appeal to the ancient, but you can only do so through the material condition of your epoch. You can only do so with the historical perspective that you've been given, that you've inherited, that those torches have been passed on, that you've been handed. So, I'm not going to pretend to have the answer. I think that the answer figures itself out. But yeah, that's just something that's been on my mind. For example, with food sovereignty, the idea of surplus, the idea of surplus to me is tangent with the idea of stability, of ecological stability. I think that's a phenomenon that anthropologists have to kowtow to. They have climate science is something that kind of gets shoved in our face. But again, that's not an accident. That's the epoch that we live in. Those are the questions we have to answer. That's something that no other philosophy has answers to. We can't look to Schopenhauer to find answers to the climate crisis. We can't look to somebody like Adam Smith or Karl Marx for the climate crisis. Frankly, the conception of an international workers' union itself as an imperative begets itself to globalized society, which itself begets a necessity to globalization as it is tangent with stability in that way. And frankly, that's impermanent. I think that's what it boils down to, is the process of impermanence. So of course, that's where the mysticism comes in. The mysticism of wisdom in light of impermanence. So, of course, we can only find that out once we've experienced it. That is what this epoch shows us. I want to get Gabe on tonight because he and I had a plan for what we wanted to talk about. But until then, to sort of soft launch it, when he and I were talking last night, what I brought up was that I had seen a reel by a guy, and he would be great to have on live too, because he's a lot of fun. But what he had mentioned in his story was about the transition of the epoch from an epoch of what he called of fish and what did he say? It was like the epoch of maybe fish and bread to the epoch we live in now, which is the epoch of the lion and wine. That was what it was. And the distinction between the two, he said, was akin to the idea of like Christ's renunciations and asceticism. Whereas now, at our point in history, we think of like Aleister Crowley and his whole thesis to it, thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. And the cascading effects thereof. Aleister Crowley can only come out of a material condition. So the not pride, but the will to power, the coming into being that we have as a result of, well, we can derive logically. We can say, well, if we can only inherit what had happened before, we can say that this era of fish and bread had begotten the era of the lion and wine. That now we have this stability, we have this globalization, we have the opportunity to organize into unions, we have the opportunity to organize in ways that are beneficial to the individual and the individual's art. And likewise, if we don't tap into that, then we will not pass a torch on. Because like I said, that's what I would posit also as a historical imperative. Again, you can call that Darwinism, you can call it whatever you want. But frankly, the truth is, the people The people who tap into the zeitgeist of their period are the people who have the children who beget the future, basically. So, my insight, because of course, like thinking in terms of analogies, as a pattern seeker, right? Maybe you guys would understand that as we have transitioned from that period, the ascetic period of fish and bread, to now this period of the lion and wine, we have a new choice to make. We have a similar choice to make, but it is a comparatively new one. Where previously, I saw this in another video. This was actually very enlightening. I had never thought of it this way. In ancient celebrations, this is a practical example. In ancient celebrations, they would have prepared enough wine to last throughout the party, and that makes sense, of course. It's like, well, we, like me and you, have to go get the grapes. We have to go stomp on the grapes. We have to go feed them into the vessels. We have to let them sit and ferment for a month or whatever. I don't know how long. They had to do that. They had to genuinely put their labor towards that wine. They would make maybe like 5 or 6 vessels of wine. They would drink the 5 or 6 vessels of wine over the course of their Saturnalia or whatever it was, and then it would all be gone. All the wine would be gone. And I saw that video first, and then I saw that person, what they were talking about on their story, and it kind of snapped. The choice that we have to make, it used to be this. Let's put it this way. The choice used to be this. As an aspiring ascetic, let's say hypothetically, if I was to do that in the era of the fish and bread, right? If I wanted to be an ascetic, I had to forsake that which I could not have. I had to come to terms. I had to be Zen Buddha and say, the wine is going to run out. I cannot get attached to it because just like that, it's gone. And that is a tough reconciliation. That is a very tough reconciliation to have to make. We still, like you and I still have to make choices like that. However, what I had intuited from that was that since we have graduated from the era of fish and bread into this era of the lion and wine, the choice is no longer, I have to forsake that which I cannot have. Now, because of the material conditions I was talking about before, now we have the global unions. Now we have the globalization. I have to, for you and I, this is the new question that you and I have to answer. And I specifically mean you and I. We have to forsake that which we could have, which we can have. I can go to the store and I can buy wine that was made in South America or Florida or Europe. We can buy as much wine as we want for a very comparatively cheap price. No longer do I have to go and I have to make my own wine. No longer do we have to depend on us running out of wine at Saturnalia. Instead, the question is totally flipped. We still have reconciliations we have to make, but it's completely, I mean, you talk about a dialectic, right? Where back then, the cognition is totally different. It's a negation of itself, where I had to depend on myself being cool with the fact that it was going to run out. Now I have to be cool with the fact that I'm not going to sit and drink all day. We totally can do that. You and I practically absolutely could do that. We could go buy Shitty K at the gas station or the spirit shop down the street, and we could be zooted out of our minds all day. So likewise, those types of new questions that we have to ask, they're not so much like new questions. It's not that we're answering like new ideas. Nobody's coming up with a new idea because there's nothing new under the sun, of course. However, it's kind of like what I said. It's the relationship between the two. It's the relationship between that forsaking of the fish and bread and the forsaking of the lion and the wine. So it's something to ponder. It's interesting. I find that stuff provocative. Um, I'm interested in your guys' takes. I'm interested in in what other maybe kinds of questions. I think that our language will shift accordingly. I think that our culture will shift accordingly. I think it will continue to do so. I think it's like a smudge, like a gradient. I think that our skills will shift. I think that of course, like I said, our worldview entirely different from even just 100 years ago. If you talk to your grandma about, I don't know what age you guys are, but if you talk to your grandma about her victory garden from World War II, depending on what culture you're a part of, it's going to be a lot different from a garden that you would be inclined to grow today. I think, okay, here's another thing that I think, people talk about how the course of history is a pursuit towards civilization, right? That every stage of history has to become more and more civilized. This is a thought I have often, is that the compromises that come with civilization, I think that's what we make all the time. I think the difference is, though, we can be speaking about two different civilizations, you and I. I think that if you have three people in a room, you have three different conceptions, but the common denominator is the fact that we have to compromise something towards that civilization. Whether that be freedom, whether that's intelligence, whether that's, musculature, or whether that's cognition, whether that's worldview or language. I think that whenever periods of history happen, maybe if you're a Marxist, if you're into material dialectic, you might understand, or you might see like an analogy towards, what, like the two things that intersect for the sake of the one that is birthed out of it. That's the connection that I make there. I say that I think that the material dialectic, I think that civilization is this like poisonous, like snake tumor that curls and crawls around the staff of life. I think that there is a common path. I think there is one common path. I think a part of that path is obviously civilization. But I think that which is civilization is a compromise that thinks it's more important than it is. That civilization is the sharp, it's the two vines rubbing against each other that have grown so thick and swollen that they rub and they rot, like when you're deep in summer and you have tomatoes going and they're all tangled up in each other and there's no if I'm not pruning my tomatoes, there's no accountability for the tomatoes, if that makes sense. Hear me out. That likewise, if you give enough prosperity, if you give enough opportunity, if you give enough accumulation of resources to any one living thing or to any period of time, okay, do you see what I'm saying? Like if I gave a ton of resources to a period of time, to people in a period of time, they would grow and they would multiply. This is, of course, sociologically, you call that the demographic transition model. This is proof. I mean, it sounds crazy, but I promise all of this has precedent. Like, this isn't like strange or new. If you give people who did not have resources, if you give them a new, we'll say for the sake of simplification, if you can give them a stream of resources that guarantees their healthcare, that guarantee their caloric intake, that guarantee their prosperity, we'll use the term prosperity as as a collection thereof. If you can guarantee their prosperity, they'll multiply. And so it's a strange phenomenon. It's a predictable, it's a repeatable pattern. It's all these things. So no matter where you're in, any compromise that you could make towards a civilization is really, this is what I'm positing, is that what we call civilization is kind of like a collective hallucination, right? Insofar as when we do have a collection of people who all happen to be prosperous, we all agree, we all say, oh, well, this is very strange. We have all these new questions to ask. Well, how do we organize ourselves in terms of a law? How do we, if it just so happens materially that we unlocked, maybe say if we're 2,000 years ago, we could say that we unlocked a quarry mine a mile away. Suddenly now we can build a big courthouse to build a law that again is a collective ideal of the people. And then we point at that and we say, that's civilization. We have to uphold civilization. Meanwhile, if we could kind of take a bird's eye view to that group of people, you would say, well, it's very strange that these people, again, if the bird's eye view is a materialist, the materialist would say, well, it's very strange that these groups of people were given temporary access to prosperity, and the first thing they did was take credit for it. They took credit for it. They thought they did something, bro. They thought they were cooking. But really, it's a collective hallucination. So when I talk, like on my website, when I talk about agriculture and determinism, that's kind of my point, is that, so the theory, if I'm overgeneralizing, it goes like this, right? So about 12,000 years ago, there's a very harsh temperature shift for the globe. The entire globe underwent a drastic temperature shift. They call it the Younger Dryas period, in which the global temperature dropped so significantly that the food that animals ate died off very rapidly. And so likewise, the animals began to die off as well. We attribute a lot of human hunting pressure to that as well, because the animals couldn't reproduce as fast. So of course it's a negative feedback loop. All of those animals go extinct, right? Think about the pictures we've seen with woolly mammoths being hunted by Neanderthals and stuff like that. That's this period of time. It's about 12,000 years ago. So when that period had come to pass, it only lasted about, I think it was like 13,000 years ago until 11,000 years ago. It only lasted 2,000 years. 2,000 years is not a long time. Okay, let me make that clear, that if we're talking from this perspective, what I'm talking about that bird's eye view, 2,000 years is nothing, because I'm thinking in terms of, like, let's talk about 12,000 years ago. Let's talk about 12,000 years from now. So likewise, during that period of time, humans then had to go kind of into occultation. We had to kind of retreat and coalesce and accumulate into each other, right? So think of like cultural development. So what coincidentally happened, of course, materially, what was materially predestined to happen, was that when that temperature shift dropped so drastically, it rose back up. Again, like I said, it was about 12. You can read it in the article because that's where I cite the numbers. 13,000 to 11,000. So then about 11,000 years ago was the recovery process, wherein all of those animals were gone. Remember, I said that they all went extinct? Okay, that's important, because what came back were the plants. That's the important part. So suddenly, all of these animals are gone that we were so dependent on. Now, the plants that the animals were eating were grasses and legumes. So if you look throughout history, if you ask any anthropologist, I'm not making any of this up. All of you can send an email to your local university's anthropology department. You can ask them, what happened around 11,000 years ago with the temperature, and what was the result of, like I would say the agrosphere, but like the biosphere, the biological sphere of humankind. What they would say is that simultaneously, spontaneously, all throughout the world, with no connection at all of the people suddenly discovered and developed agriculture. I don't think of it that way. I don't think that I think that gives humans a lot of credit, which may be credit where it's due, okay, like all due respect. But I think it went more like this. I think all of those plants were suddenly coming back to fruition. They had a positive feedback loop, because like I said, that's how we're going to define logically our stability. That those plants, grasses and legumes, that were the food of the animals to begin with, all of those returned. All of the humans were in those habitats. So the humans that were in those spaces suddenly had access to a much more diverse, we would say like cereal grain crop, right? Legumes like beans were cultivated simultaneously all over the world at the same time as well, because that's how you make a complete protein, is through the, I don't know how many there are, but there's like different amino acids you have to balance, so the people who happen to do that. So, okay, in the Americas, they had maize that they cultivated close to Central America that quickly spread up north and down south. In South America, they had potatoes, they had tubers. In the like Eurasian area between like Asia Minor, they had the Anatolian people that were inheriting wheat. In Africa, they had millet. In India, they had another type of millet. I forget what it was. It was like finger millet or something, as opposed to African pearl millet. And of course, in China and Japan, they had maybe not Japan at that point yet, but they had rice, right? So what is so fascinating is we see that. Of course, our contemporary scientific positivistic perspective tells us, well, humans were the ones who bravely, survived the Ice Age. And so we cultivated wheat. We discovered how to, what do they say? Give it to me, right? They say, what do they say? They say humans invented agriculture. Humans discovered that if you plant the same plant in the same spot, it'll grow. That's what humans do. I don't see it that way at all. I provide the alternative. I say that the plants were there. They were allowed to grow back, and humans said, okay, we can deal with that too. So that gives us the context now. That's kind of like the bowl of treats that I'm giving you guys to say, ponder this. That's the circumstance. That's the only circumstance by which we could transition from hunter-gatherer into a caloric, if we can guarantee prosperity, because I said we'll call that prosperity, right? If we can guarantee prosperity to a people, they have the opportunity then to spread and multiply. And then, of course, with continued stability, of course, then you get civilization. It's like 1 + 2 = 3. It's not as egoic to me. I think that we get a much rounder worldview when we consider that humans are a component of, but not a driver of this carriage, if that makes sense. So likewise, I think the exact same thing is happening today. I think that we've had the opportunity through continued prosperity, the opportunity through continued accumulation of continued guarantee of our nutrients, that we have been allowed to develop things like motherboards and fiber optic cables and screw-in light bulbs, all those things. I think that if you gave any period of human in human history, you could give any of them an amount of prosperity, and then if you gave them 12,000 years, they would do the exact same thing. Their biology would develop the same. Their cognition, their worldview would travel on the same route. There's a type of predeterminism that comes with that, and of course, likewise, it's sort of, oh man, there's a word for when the life cycle of the individual mimics the life cycle of the whole. And I can't remember what it was. It was a really great word, because that's the way that I would see it. Now that we have all these new questions to ask as we're approaching this age, as we're embodying this age of the lion and the wine, as opposed to the fish and the bread, is now that we have this bird's eye view, this grand scale, all of this history, all the clay tablets that have accumulated over history, we can bundle all those up, we can look at those, and we can say, wow, we have a pretty good idea of history that we've never had before. Actually, I think we can make a good prediction. I think we can make a good logical estimate as to what the future might look like. I think that is something that will have to happen. I think that's something that will inevitably occur within the next 200 years. Because we've already gotten this with thinkers like Adam Smith and like Karl Marx, people like Hegel, Max Weber, all of those people who have exactly, if you give humans the opportunity to do something, of course they're going to do it. And so that's what I'm saying is, like, these past 12,000 years, we've been allowed to accumulate clay tablets. We've been allowed to to accumulate papyrus scrolls. So then, of course, in the 1800s, you're going to get people who can look back on all those. You're going to get people who draw conclusions from those for the future. So when Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel's in Germany, and he's watching Napoleon on his French Enlightenment quest to embody the empire, march his horse down those German roads, I can understand completely how he would be inspired to write about the Geist. To me, that only makes sense. The idea that a person can embody the nation, I mean, that is just so beautiful. That such accumulation can occur. You can only get that in the 1800s. You can only get that in the 2020s because of the stability we've been allowed to have. And like I've been saying, with stability comes accumulation. I mean, that is the ultimate question that we have to come to reconcile here and now, is this process of accumulation, the fact that we have such stability. Now, those of you who are enlightened chuds as well might be making an analogy in their head. They're like, well, what's the dialectic of stability? Oh, so if the biosphere is the thing that determines, the human sphere, the sphere of prosperity, then the negation thereof, if we come to reconcile that negation, what do we get? We get an anxiety about climate change. I think it was a predetermined notion that, of course, after this period of stability, any anxiety about the trajectory of humankind, any trajectory about change, will inevitably lead to that, to what we consider, we can wrap it up in a box with a bow and call it climate change. When we see articles about climate change, when we see people on reels who make us feel anxious about climate change, we are like Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel watching Napoleon march his horse down the German streets. Yeah. So let's see what we've got in the comments here. Plants vs. Zombies. Yes. Alternate universes. I don't believe in them. Sorry. Continental gibberish. Yes, I agree. Absolutely. You only get continental gibberish when you get 12,000 years of grain brain, bro. If you think continental gibberish is bad, check out the maybe not millions, but thousands of old papyrus scrolls that the Chinese have locked up. Okay, you think that's bad? All right. Well, out of the Piscean age into the age of Aquarius, that's exactly right. I mean, from the Star Speak perspective. Hegel's dialectical thought is founded in Christianity Trinity, but they both come from common human fundamental. I mean, you could say that Christianity comes from Platonism, so I mean, yes, or at least, okay, well, yeah, Christos is a Greek word for a Messiah that already had precedent to be communicable by the time that the Hebrew mystics came, the apostles to Greece, to Europe. I mean, we can view it from that perspective. I think it's pretty useful to view it from that perspective. They already had a Platonic current religion. That was Plato's goal, was to establish precedent religion. And likewise, okay, right. The ground was fertile with opportunity there. Yeah, and those scrolls should be put on display as to how philosophy should not be written. I mean, sure, yeah. But if you live in denial of what is, then you're just like angry and weird. You can post yours and or you can hop on here and talk about it, but you probably won't. Noah says, brother, read Derrida. Would you? Okay, yeah, we'll explain, because I've heard that name, but I don't know. I mean, what's the utility there? What does Derrida have to say about it? Yeah, I don't know if it has anything to do. Postmodernism, the idea of oh shoot, I always forget the word as soon as it's necessary. Is it seismography, where it's the French philosophy where they read everything as signs and symbols, and they interpret things like advertisements as like hieroglyphics? That stuff's interesting. I think that stuff's interesting because it gives us a good way to approach postmodernism that isn't like fully like brainstem. I don't want to say a bad word on Instagram Live, because I'm uploading this to YouTube, but maybe like just developmentally delayed. You know, for example, I think one of the best analogies I heard was that the ultimate resource, the ultimate asset to post-modernity, to all of the postmodern artists, is plastic. You know, that plastic is the ultimate symbol of postmodernism because it's so, you know, you can mold it into anything, you can transform it, it's not permanent. And to me, when I saw that, that made perfect sense. It's like, that's what you get after 12,000 years of accumulation of stability, because only then would you have the cognitive capacity to want to transform, to want to change what everybody else thinks is true. You can call that a dogma. The fact that we can cognitively understand and process that information is itself a miracle. And so likewise, the fact that we have access to a resource like plastic at the same time as we have kind of a cognitive plastic in our brainstem, where we say that, well, you know, oh, the old times can't be right because look, we have all this stuff now. The postmodernists, what are they, you know, like the deconstructionalists, like Michel Foucault, all those people, the people who want to challenge power, who want to identify power. You can only have that. Like I said, they arise mutually. They arise in such a fashion that, that you physically cannot have one without the other. We think that we're separate from our environment. We think that we are somehow distinct free will beings. But truthfully, we are as free as trash bags are in the wind. You know, it's like when a gust of wind pulls together the branches and the leaves and twirls them around. That's a free agent. It's a free agent of a whirlwind. But frankly, there simultaneously it has a will to power. Yes, that's true. However, it is also completely determinate on that geist of the wind. And that, I think, is the solution to postmodernism. The idea that things actually are not arbitrary, that things are not, arbitrary, but also like, I think, frankly, again, I want to box it up and wrap it in a bow. I want to say that this accumulation, this prosperity is impermanent. That is the question that we have to answer, or that we have to reconcile. This accumulation we have, this plastic, this oil, this DoorDash, this lamp, I mean, you know, like the stuff on my walls, all of this is so impermanent. That is what the ascetics who I'm thinking like 1,000 years ahead. People 1,000 years ahead will look back at this millennia and they'll say the ascetics of their time had to come to terms with the fact that all of the accumulation they had was impermanent. That's kind of my point here. Noah is recommending me to read La Salle. That would be great if you could give me any kind of inclination as to what that might mean. You tell me to read it, but I'm not going to do that right now. I don't have a book by him. So you could participate in the conversation. You could throw a quote in by this person or a sentiment that we can talk about. But no, I'm not just going to heed and read that person. So who do we got? Lolo, Rofo, Kalia. Hello. Lily, Deseshi. Hello. I saw Ethan joined. Sorry I didn't get to say hi to you, Ethan. Nahai, Kamakatse. Hello. Sean was in. I missed that. That's my bad, bro. Who else do we got? A lot of... Jill just joined. That's crazy. How's it going? Yeah, I think that was really the end of that tangent. I wish you had joined 5 minutes earlier, Jillian. We were talking about, how do I say it nicely? The approach to postmodernism that we get from a period of accumulation of a period of prosperity, like the one that we've had for the past 12,000 years. The inevitability of postmodernism as a result of stability and prosperity. What else do we got? Who all is in? Oh, I've got a few. Hi, guys. Okay. Well, what do you guys think? Throw some stuff. This is a question and answer. Obviously, I was giving that tangent just to fill in space, but what's on your minds? What are we? What's the zeitgeist? What is the geist feeling right now? People complain about continental philosophy. They complain about, like that person was doing. Um, but, give me the alternative. Give me the dialectical negation. Come on. Let's go back to the Neolithic. That's what I'm saying, bro. That's what I'm saying is that, again, if we're dealing in terms of the negation, oh man, we get to use physical, or what do you call it? Visual cues? Visual aids. I'm going to give you guys visual aids. This is how, the way that I see it, maybe it's communicable. Noah says, take one step into Massachusetts and you'll become an urban legend. The shit is too niche, bro. I just want you to elaborate. I just want you to talk about what you're thinking, please. Or at least hop on the live. Let's talk, because I think if you have the knowledge to critique something, you should, well, okay, this is a should statement. It's not an is or whatever. Is versus ought. But my point is, I would have a lot of fun if one of you guys hopped on and challenged it. So true. What is this, bro? What is this? Okay, guys, pause. I just want to show you a simple chart. Okay. So we have to define some terms first. Maybe this won't be as helpful as I thought, but we'll at least give it a shot because we're just experimenting here, right? Norma fucking Jean, that's your username. Are you one of these Noah heads talking about some like, you're doing a continental philosophy, and then I'm like, okay, well, what do you mean by that? And then you're like, read Derrida. Okay. I'm not going to do that. I wish you would explain what you meant. Okay, let me cobble together this thing here because I want to explain what I'm talking about when I talk about like principles of negation and stuff like that. Maybe this won't be so helpful. I'm trying to think how it could go for something like nah. Yeah. Norma, I'm going to call you Norma because that seems like it would be your name. I didn't mean to assume, but no, I was just curious. You're a random chud. Okay. My culture is not your costume. Negation. Okay. What was I thinking about? Well, okay, let me do it this way. Okay, this is better. Anupa. Okay. That sounds a little bit LARPy, but I can live with that. Because you're not asking me to read Derrida. Noah genuinely hit us with Brother Read Derrida on a live stream. Can we believe that? If that was on any of your bingos, you can cross that off now, by the way. Okay. So let's do this. I was going to do like a humanistic dialectic. I'm just making up terms. But what I think is more useful, at least from somebody as inclined towards mysticism as I am, is the idea of active and you can call it passive, I suppose. But if we have an active aspect, right? And we say that active aspect is such that it permeates, it moves forward into something. then we have to have something for it to move into, otherwise it's just stagnant, right? And if it's stagnant, then it is not active. That might be a little bit intuitive, but let's see how we do. So I'll give you guys visual aids where we have two symbols. This is our set that we have active and passive. So let's assume that this is like a car driving on a highway or something like that. And of course, please jump in with ideas and suggestions about how to explain this better. But this is just the way, this is what I'm talking about. So if we have an active and a passive concept like that, can you guys see that? The active is the plus and the passive is the minus. The active is engaging with the passive, right? So we might be inclined to say these are two distinct forces. I can't read I don't want to get distracted, but I'm getting distracted. Bro said that's a battery. Yes. Yeah, that's a battery. Okay. We might be inclined to call it two different forces. But I want to stop us there before we get too far, because rather what I'm positing is that this is one force, one cohesive force, because you can't separate the two. I only know that this is active because there's a passive to compare it to. So it's kind of like this. Okay, hear me out. This is going to look crazy, but they seem to arise mutually. That's what we call the principle of mutual arising. So I can only get a positive and a negative if they both arise at the exact same time. It's kind of like, if I clap my hands, there's the active and then the accepting. For instance, they would say like, well, the sound waves have to travel through the air. So in that scenario, there's simultaneously an active and a passive. They both exist at the same time. So that's the methodology that we're working with when we're talking about history in terms of negation. So then again, we'll go back to our battery here. Actually, that's a useful metaphor. I appreciate that. I'm going to pin that comment because that's funny. If I can do that. Yeah, pin comment. Awesome. So we have this one thing. So actually we thought it was two things, but it's actually one, right? So let's do that again. So actually then I'm going to say, well, if that's the active as it's emanating, well, there's no expanse for it to travel into. So actually I'm going to give it an expanse to travel into. These should be square, but they're not. So it's kind of like this when I think about it, right? This active aspect has contaminated this negative aspect, and it's turned both of them active. So then, okay, the negation is when I draw a new square. If I'm negating an active aspect because it's both active because it's been contaminated, quote unquote, then it has evolved into an active that also needs a negative. Like that, right? But the difference is, once I did that, I actually just contaminated it again. So I'll draw another arrow to show that, again, this is now part of the battery. So actually, what the positive was, to your point, Anupa, if I'm saying your name right, this whole thing was the positive. That's the negative. Now we have the battery. Now the battery has been formulated in such a way where it has the positive aspect that can spiral into a passive expansive, right? I know that might sound crazy, but again, if we pair that with the notion of the mutual arising, then it completes itself. It's a full, yet it's also an empty system. So, of course, now the keen amongst us might be saying, well, doesn't that all become contaminated because you drew another arrow? And to that I say yes. So I'm going to draw another big. Notice what I'm doing, though, is that I am making it bigger each time because it has to exist further and further. So, but we have to showcase that our active is in fact being an active set. It is it has that trait, because this is like kind of like drawing like a set theory thing therein. So what's happening is that we have this curvature of the passive aspect. You know, we can kind of guide. I don't know if you guys can see that, but do you see what I mean though? Like, isn't that just a little bit neat that we can trail it like that, and it's just going to go and go and go? So when I see that, what I think is the night sky, you know, and I think that's pretty cute. I think about the fact that there is like a tiny little bit of light and then a vast expanse, and yet it is whole. Yet our solution is whole. There are no problems. There are no disruptions. The sun still comes up every day. Gravity still works. What else do we take for granted? You know, the air that we breathe, all of that stuff, it has to do with that relationship. We have a request for the video. Yo,
Hey,
my brother.
yo, my brother.
What's up? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I was looking at your little thesis about batteries and stuff,
Awesome. I'm so glad. I'm so glad.
positive and negative. Hey, look who
Yeah.
joined. My favorite.
'Cause
Hey, yo, Pat and Denia too. What the hell?
we got the whole gang, bro. We got the whole gang. I love it. This is great. Well,
The
so talk
synthesis,
to me. What's on your mind?
the synthesis of positive and negative was reminding me of the Abraxas subject we were talking about last night.
Really? Was it now?
Yeah,
Very interesting. Mhm.
I feel like Abraxas is like the Western correlation of the Taiji symbol in Taoism,
Mhm.
opposites contained within a whole kind of thing.
Yeah.
Ooh.
And the union thereof.
Hmm.
Yeah. That was one of the more profound moments in my development was reading a book by Fiddly Vilbert, which that is genuinely his name. And he's a Taoist master. He wrote a book on like rudimentary Taoism. His biggest thing that he said, and I basically just summarized it there, was that when people see the Taijitsu, they see representations of Taoism, they hear a lot about the two forces. There are two forces in Taoism. There's yin and then there's yang. And we have to balance the two. What he said is that that's actually a farce. That's actually like a terrible lie, and it contaminates one's perspective. It's actually one force, because you cannot separate yin from yang. If I have a yang force, it's just like that teeny tiny little plus mark surrounded by all of those negatives, where I can't separate those two. I have to keep drawing more negatives to encompass, to embody it. So they
Yeah,
arise mutually. I think because of that, the only conception we can draw is something like a something that holds the totality. It supports it. It supports that accumulation. I think I want to give you the stage next. I want to say that's what kind of leads us to Abraxas.
yeah. It would be like separating yin and yang would be like separating two quantum entangled particles. You can't do it. It defies the laws of physics. A lot of like this talk about animus and anima within the psyche, even of your own complex or whatever, your own psyche, right? Um,
Hmm.
in Freemasonry, there's all these different rituals that um, are about union of opposite. What is it called? The reconciliation of opposites. So they have the
Hmm.
bridal chamber and they have syzygy. A lot of it is based off of this idea that there is a dual force within us. So we are Abraxas. We contain multiplicities within us.
Yes. Yes, there's nothing about us that could be separate from Abraxas, because then that's like separating yin from yang. Like to your point about particles, it's like if I have a particle, it also implies there's like a vessel. It's like there's a space that holds the particle as well. You can't separate the two because if you separate the space, there's nothing to hold the particle. There's no vacuum to hold it in, and so it just can't exist there because matter doesn't exist. But matter also doesn't exist where matter already is. There are all of these rules, but exactly. I mean, that just proves your point about the non-dual nature, the totally encompassing but also the completely empty, and the fact that that is a paradox that can be rectified. I mean, that is like a really, to me, that's a profound theological position to take.
Yeah, it's a paradox within a paradox. It's like
Hmm.
there is duality, but
Hmm.
there is no duality. It's just oneness.
Yes. Hmm.
It's I guess that's non-dualism, right?
Exactly, bro. I want to point at this one more time just because we have a couple people here who were still on the live when we were talking about it. So this is something that I talk about a lot, this little chart that I made with the positive and the negative. So what you just said about everything is dual and not dual is a perfect way to summarize this. And this is what I call, like in the articles that I write, like all the talks that I make people listen to, as the mystical. I don't think you guys can read it because it'll be mirrored, but it's the mystical dialectic. It is the process by which a paradox is resolved. It's a relationship, it's a process, it's a moving system between the two. Um, so, wherein you have this union of the one that exists down here, but you also have the two. So, the oneness and the two can coexist. It's not that there's no God, it's that everything simultaneously is God and it's God experiencing himself, but that's not a paradox. Or it's not an unsolved paradox.
It can be resolved through awareness. Yeah, I agree. Wait, I
Mhm.
actually have to use the bathroom. Not gonna lie. I'll be
Yeah,
back
that's
in a.
cool.
I'll be back.
Okay, yes. Well, let's look at who we've got. We've got, um, who do we have hanging out? Gabe, what's up? Possessed Doll, what's up? Oh, weren't you saying that you wanted to talk? You could join if you wanted to, I bet. Let's let Gabe and talk for a little while, and then we might open it up. Gnarl Gnarl. Oh, what is your name? Gail? Yeah, you've been around since like the beginning. You're goated. Make this guy a mod immediately. Pattern denier, Pharaoh, goaded. Jill Scott, goaded. Anupa, you're still around. That's goaded. Cool. Um, yeah, we've got a whole gaggle here, guys. This is fun. Okay, what do we have people saying? I'm not gonna. I can't say that. Okay, golden ratio. That's true. That's insightful. Yeah, isn't it? Yeah, it is. I'm just saying, bro. When shit just kind of works like that, you know what I mean? Yes, you're right. That's the golden ratio. Okay, we're cooking, guys. We're cooking with gas. Okay, come on. If 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 okay, a broken clock is right twice a day, kind of a thing. Like I'm not saying that I'm right about everything, but credit where it's due. It's like when we work together, I think we make a good team, guys. Okay. Possessed All says hi. Pattern Denier says yo. Possessed All, you can't hog a loogie. Okay. Dimensional tourism says you are a human. Yeah, that's true, isn't it? I suppose that's true. Um, Gail, is that your name? I feel like, dude, you were in the Discord servers back in like 2020. Is that right? If that's true, that's really crazy. I'm glad that you're here. I'm very, grateful, I kowtow that you've hung around. Isn't it crazy seeing how shit like this, like we're like it's what do you call that? Like just a reflective, like looking at the night sky, it's fucking weird how this shit works out. It's like a web. Yes, it is. Yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah. The value that's a verse you'd get out of the Tao Te Ching, bro. That shit would say like The value of the web comes from its empty space. And you'd be like, what the hell? What the hell are you talking about? Because that's so true. Because, I mean, you know, just one more time to clarify, this is all empty space. All of those negatives are empty space. We're looking at a night sky. We're looking at the teeny tiny positive. By the way, for the keen amongst you, I'll let you in on a little secret. Aleister Crowley's Book of the Law is about that chart that I just showed you. It's about Hadith, which is the teeny tiny little forward moving yang, which he got from Taoism, by the way, because he hung out in China. He totally ripped their shit, bro. And Nuit, which is the passive expansive, which is exactly that. He turned those into two different gods, which I think is kind of a mistake. I don't know the Thelemic secrets that well. Yes, I'm still yapping. Thank you, Jillian. I don't know the Thelemic secrets that well, but if I had to guess, they probably rectify that. They probably rectify that paradox by appealing to an entity like Abraxas, who's like the one of you guys are going to know that the sign of the pharmacy. You know what that sign is, where it has the snakes that go around the pole. I was talking about it earlier, but I can't remember what it's called. Yeah, but that's what I'm talking about. I know someone's going to say that in just a sec. Gabe said he's going to the bathroom, bro. That's kind of crazy. Can you guys believe that? Cadesis? Catechus? Probably. I'll take your word for it. I can look that up. So I have a Quaker sticker on my computer. Isn't that cool? I got that from a real life Quaker, guys. Pharmacy logo Greek symbol. Oh, Asclepius? Okay, hold on. No, that's not it. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Pharaoh was right. Your name is Josh, right? I'm pretty sure. Josh was right. Caduceus? Caduceus? Whatever. Yeah, that's it. Exactly. Long tangent, but worth it. I'm sure Gabe would have a lot to say about that. I'm excited to hear what he has on his mind. What do we think about Aleister Crowley and Thelema? Me personally, I think it's very funny how he inherited the esoteric Jewish system of Kabbalah from the Golden Dawn. And his first thought was, that's not right. I have to fix it. And I actually am going to fix it, by the way. I think that's very funny. I think that speaks to his encapsulation as a lion and wine kind of a guy rather than like a fish and bread type. I think that's very symbolic of the Aeon of Horus that we live in. Okay, let's get Gabe's input on that. Maybe. Let's see. Come on. There we go.
Yo, what's up, bro?
What's up?
Man,
Were you listening?
I just said. Sorry.
No, I was just asking if you were able to hear the conversation.
Yes, I did. Yeah, I heard probably about 15 seconds or 20 seconds of it.
Okay. Well, please, yeah. I was talking about the active and the passive again. I was talking about the golden ratio for a second. I was talking about the Hadith and Nuit from Thelema. I was talking about how they are going to have to rectify something like Abraxas with it, which they probably do, but it's esoteric. And then we were talking about Thelema afterwards. I was curious what your thought about all of that was.
Hello?
Ooh, can you hear me? Uh
Dude, my live is like genuinely tweaked out so bad.
oh.
Hold up. I don't know what's going on, bro. Oh my. Give me
My Wi-Fi's on. There's not really much else I can do. Can you see me? Can you hear me? Oh. Oh, well, Gabe is having technical difficulties, which is chill, which is all right. Who do we have left? We have Possessed All and Anupa. Anupa, you're chill. I don't think we're in any group chats, but we, I'll add you to one maybe if you're cool. Ayo Helen Keller. Is that to Gabe or what? I was gonna have Gabe yap, and then I could, sketch or whatever. But well, what else do we got? I mean, there's like Felima. I don't know if I follow you. Okay, let's get Gabe in. Gabe, if you are watching, I accepted your request, but then it disappeared and said nobody wanted to join. So if I had to guess, I don't know, like, oh, I wonder if my live's gonna end soon because Instagram does do that. And it's typically when we start to have problems like this, it might automatically end. That would suck. But okay, Gabe, we should make a group chat with these people.
blood.
Oh, oh, hello.
Greetings, blood. Yeah,
Greetings, blood.
the caduceus, I was interested by that because that's the symbol of health, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it correlates to the Kundalini, like the going up the spine with the two serpents, because the serpent,
Mm.
the coiled serpent, goes up to your pineal gland. I was watching it's like 2.5 hour dissertation by this alleged Freemasonic scholar who was teaching about sexual transmutation
Mm-hmm.
and how sexual transmutation is like a huge part of Freemasonry, and like you're told not to spill the I think they call it the cup of Hermes, which is like the fancy esoteric way of saying never goon.
Never goon, bro. Never let me know. Never let me hear about you gooning, bro.
Never spill the cup of Hermes, bro. That's like the fucking esoteric LARP version, yeah. No, I don't know. I just had to respond to Josh saying that. But
Yeah, I'm glad
yeah.
you clarified.
Oh, were we talking about Aleister Crowley? You asked like a question about Crowley or Crowley or whatever.
Yeah, well, I'm just curious about your thoughts because I hear a lot of people's different perspectives, and I am so on the middle of the fence about it, where I feel like he is so potent in the zeitgeist, but simultaneously it's kind of like that's to his detriment where everybody's looking at him and critiquing him. I'm curious what your thoughts on him are.
I think Crowley and Philema is an inherently like controversial religion, but um, let's just say even somebody like Joseph Smith from like the Mormon, Joseph Smith.
Hmm. Yeah,
I'm sure if you were to look into his doctrine, you'd probably find some real shit, right? So it's like that saying,
that's
clock
true.
strikes right twice a day, or broken clock strikes correctly twice a day.
We were
Um,
talking about that. It's funny you say that.
yeah, so I mean, I'm a real big fan of his whole like the axiom or whatever of the lemma is like do as thou wilt, love under will. Wait, it's
Hmm.
do as thou wilt, love under will. Um, love is the law. I don't know. I think I might be paraphrasing. I kind of like that quote. I really do.
Hmm. Do what
Um,
thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law. Love under will, which is where they get 93/93 from. Yes.
yeah, it's like, what is that like the gematria, like unraveling
Yeah.
of the words or something?
Yeah, I think it was one of those things where Aleister Crowley had his like own system of gematria because a lot of the time I can't find direct translations other than people saying like take his word for it basically. But so the word thelema is Greek for will. It's Greek for that word that he's talking about, will. But there's also the word agape, which translates to love, which is
Yeah,
why they say love and will. And both of those in that gematria system are 93, coincidentally. So he saw that and was like, he took it and ran with it. Yeah.
dude. Funny thing about Greek words for love, there's like 7 different words for love in Greek, and they all are like describing a different type of love.
Hmm. Interesting.
There's like
Interesting.
agape, and then like eros is like romantic, like sexual love, and then there's like yeah, there's a few other types too. There's like one for like platonic love. There's one for like familial love. It's really interesting. But yeah, no,
Hmm.
it's funny. Yeah, you were saying how he adopted so much like Jewish esoterica into his work, but Order of the Golden Dawn and like Freemasonry in general, like all those systems, like the Tree of Life is pretty much the one of like the most primary symbols they use. And if you're like doing like solar magic or like ceremonial magic, you're pretty much just saying words in Hebrew, like angel names,
Yeah.
elemental names in Hebrew, names of the elements in Hebrew. So
Hmm.
yeah, I mean basically like almost all magic is based off of Jewish, or like the vast majority of magic is based off of like, I guess one could say like Jewish esoterica, unfortunately.
For better, for worse. Yeah, exactly. And that's the way that I think about it is like kind of like what we were saying earlier in the live stream. I don't know if you were here for it, if anybody here was, but I was talking more at like a social political scale where we have all of these new like conceptions and worldviews of the world that don't quite match up to the old standards. So what we get philosophically is us having to ask new questions, basically, or at least questions that answer things that we tried to solve in previous epochs. And I think that a lot of like, there's the Mao Zedong quote that I like where he says, "Let 100 flowers bloom," which is a metaphor for let like 100 different schools of thought, the marketplace of ideas. I think that the reason why you and I have resentment towards that fact, at least for me personally, maybe you can speak on this, is that fact of I was not raised in a culture that cultivated that kind of respect. Like I don't see those words and like, oh yes, that makes clear sense. Like I should become, an older Order of the Golden Dawn, or like, a Mason, or I could not do that without cutting off a huge section of myself. I could not do that without a great compromise. So then what I posit then is that we're going to do things, we're going to create these religions like what Crowley did, where we have
They're
where
kind
we don't have those compromises, where we grow into our own.
as a society, if you've noticed, as as society becomes more and more atomized and individuality takes the reins,
Hmm.
spiritual systems also transform. Like chaos magic. That's like I talked to somebody about this. They didn't agree with me saying chaos magic was the most postmodern form of magic, but I still think that it is. Um,
Hmm. You're right. I'm inclined to agree.
and it's like a product of this, like, I guess one could say like third, what is it, third stage capitalism. It's like where there's like not as much cohesive culture. You know, you could be like fucking 25% Arabic, 25% white, 25%, I don't know, Jewish, 25% Hispanic. Like you could be like just a smorgasbord or like mystery ethnicity. So you don't really have like in-group. A lot of people, there's a lot of people are involved in esoterica. Like for example, somebody like that of your ethnicity, right? Like of Celtic or Germanic origin. A lot of people will like, oh well, since I'm Celtic or Germanic, I'm only going to use runes. You know, I'm only going to use like Aryan pagan like Norse shit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
I think that you're right.
and yeah, I guess like a Chinese person would use like the I Ching and Taoism and whatever, but I don't really agree with that. I don't. I think that's kind of like a limited perspective. I do think like I have noticed that people are kind of like instinctually drawn to like traditions of their blood, if that makes sense. But I think it's a limited way of perception. But it is interesting. Like back in the day, traditions were very, 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 very a part of your ethnicity. You know, like Kabbalah was basically exclusively Jewish. Nobody knew about Kabbalah. Like nobody spread the secrets of Kabbalah to the masses. Like it was basically oral tradition. Like it was pretty much um, like never spoken about to the goy, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's only like recently to where like I don't know some Jewish person probably like let everybody know let the goy know about Kabbalah, right? A race trader,
Spill the
right?
beans.
Yeah. But prior to that, nobody knew that, and it was esoteric knowledge was I would say more esoteric. Like you would have to be one weird motherfucker to go to like a weird library and like start to learn about Hermeticism, even in like the 18th century.
Yeah. Yeah. You know they were doing it too. There was like one autistic ass dude who would sit all
Alistair
day.
Crowley, that was
Yeah.
Alistair, bro.
That's him, bro. That was him. Yeah, for real. His dad was like an Episcopal priest or something. He's like, why can't you just be fucking normal? Yeah.
Back then, being weird, you had to be really weird to be weird. The standard of weird has definitely gone down. You don't have to be that weird to be weird anymore.
Hmm.
Like Carl Jung was weird as fuck. He was like schizo. He was having like hallucinogenic visions and stuff as a kid. He was weird, right? So
Yeah. A weird little German Swiss kid. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, that makes sense. I think there's a direct connection. Just this is the analogy that my head makes, where I was talking before about how, like way earlier in the live stream, about how like the limitations of prosperity kept us close to our people, right? So to speak, our ancestors. And so because of that, I can totally understand how they would have ethno-religious movements. It sounds to me like, your tribe is your best friend. So likewise, once we reached a stage of existence where we were elevated to a stage of capitalism, where suddenly now we have a surplus of prosperity. We have so much abundant energy. I can take a plane to China like, in a couple of weeks, which is really strange. It's a strange thing that can happen. So the fact that we can do that, it has essentially boiled down all of these religions, and suddenly we all have our most sacred books and texts open to each other, or it's downloaded online. You can look through the Kabbalah that used to be a sacred ethnic secret, almost not a purposeful secret maybe, but definitely secretive or mysterious. All of those things, nothing's really sacred anymore. Everything's out in the open, which I think is very representative. The fact that we have to now that we have all different people of all different ethnic groups moving from country to country, all having to learn to cohabitate, we have to turn that inwards now, I don't mean have to as in like a moral imperative. I'm saying we literally have no choice but to turn inwards and discover about ourselves, our own psychic inclinations, which I think is why we had a revolution of psychiatry, why we had a revolution like what Sigmund Freud and what Carl Jung and that whole generation offered us. And I think that was only possible, like I said, because of globalization. I think that, and this is one other point I wanted to make that you had said, there's the revolution of young thinkers, young LARPers, frankly, who want to return to their tradition, where it's like, oh, I took a 23andMe test and it said that I was like 30% German, so that means that I have to use runes. I see that and I think that it is too conscious, it's too deliberate, it's too cerebral, it's too intellectual of a decision to make. For me, mysticism is body and mind, or what are the three? Body, mind, and spirit. Those three have to be united, and so in order for those three to be united, that's where the relinquishment of control comes in. That if you let go of control and see what kind of mysticism comes out, what kind of symbols come out culturally, that's the collective unconscious. That's the stuff we should be paying attention to. That's the zeitgeist that we should be paying attention to instead of trying so hard to consciously, cerebrally intellectualize our own mystic systems.
Yeah, Carl Jung was kind of like ahead of his time because he was able to perceive kind of like the meta patterns or like the fact that although, there's a completely different haplogroup if you look at China versus, I don't know, Spain or something, there's still the spirit is still the same, Like Carl Jung was kind of one of the first, like almost people that wasn't really that racist because he really saw that there was like an underlying soul that although language separates us, although ethnicity, culture, everything separates people, there's this underlying spirit that we're all collectively tapped into and we're all like a part of, right? And our myths and our culture actually show us that. And now, and he wrote like a lot of, I guess one could say perennialist ideas, like it's kind of like perennialist ideas. But nowadays, 100 years or after his birth, 60 years after his death, we're able to really see that syncretism is not really up for debate anymore. Syncretism is what everybody's doing. And Aleister Crowley was another one. Aleister Crowley, not only was he interested in Kabbalah, but he was also interested in Taoism and more importantly, the I Ching. His last effort in life was transcribing the I Ching. So that's quite vastly different mystery traditions, right? China and Israel and Judea. That's like completely far away from each other. And he was able to see the correlations between two so distantly related lands and their myths. And both of those people, Crowley and Jung, ahead of their time. Now we see that in this like sort of postmodern world, the only option we really have in a hyper individualistic society is to have a system like chaos magic, which is pretty much as far removed from any race or culture as you could possibly imagine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it's the logical conclusion of a system like Thelema. Yeah, totally agree. Interesting.
And yeah, a lot of people do like really LARP and try to like act really rigid about it. Like, oh, I found out I'm 50% this, so that means I should do this, right? But I just see that as kind of like a form of like turbo autism.
I think that's proven in the fact that they always like change it like a couple of years later, like they do that maybe for like 5 years, but then they'll like switch up and be like, oh, I'm Christian now, or like, oh, like I'm saved, I converted to Orthodox Judaism, or they convert to like, I don't know, they just become Buddhists or they call themselves just Buddhists, like, oh yeah, no, I'm just a Buddhist, man. I think that proves enough to me. It's like, well, it was all LARP in the first place. Like, where was your genuine conviction? Oh, yeah, it was all in your brainstem where conviction does not live. I think that's inevitable. I think it's like shaking sand through a sifter looking through gold or looking for gold, where only a couple people in each generation can hold on to their convictions long enough, like Crowley, like Jung, because they are genuinely divinely inspired so much that they are the ripple in the zeitgeist that goes on to pass the torch on to the next generation. That is kind of like that phenomenon where, like, if people of a specific gene like inhabit an island, they only pass on that gene. They're the survivors, so they pass their color on, or their ideas, or their language. I think it's all the same. I think it's all like an analogy that is true.
Yeah, the people that we think of, they were like harbingers of the new aeon. They were like before their age, but they were like messengers of the age to come, and they were like the torch bearers as well of the spirit. You know, they were essentially prophets, if you could say. They were ahead of their time. Um, but yeah, I
Fascinating.
mean, there is a delicate balance between opposites in all things, and I think that's what the Freemasons tap into with the syzygy and the bridal chamber, and Carl Jung was talking about the anima and the animus. There are these like there is duality everywhere, like you were saying. It's like a mandala. There's duality and there's wholeness. It's like there is duality and there's no duality. So
Hmm.
you can also think about duality in the sense of like there's the subjective and the objective. There is the internal world and the external world. There is the personal and the collective, personal unconscious and the collective unconscious. It's like more uh, noetic or metaphysical rather than concretely physical phenomena.
Hmm.
But regarding this, I think that there's a delicate balance between the urge to fit in and belong to a larger community, like a race or a nation or an ethnicity or whatever, and being your own individual or individuated person, or which is like a religion like Thelema and Chaos Magic. They're hyper individualistic, right? There's absolutely no correlation to. There's absolutely no focus on like a really a group setting. It's more like anarchist. And then you'll see something like Kabbalah, which is like, you know, Kabbalah with a K is the Jewish form. It's like very highly Jewish. But then they take the Kabbalah with a Q and it's Hermetic Kabbalah. And now it's like for the masses, right? But
Hmm.
we have like a balance between the two. I actually personally don't think that hyper individualism is good, like like in totality. I think it's good to a degree, but I think it's good for certain people at certain types of their lives. But the NPC archetype is an archetype that lives within everybody. Everybody wants to belong to something greater than themselves or to a larger group. And we're social animals, so I think we did evolve to work in tandem with each other. And
Hmm.
from an alchemical perspective, I think at certain stages of our inner myth, our mythopoeia, we need to have a hyper individualistic religion or spiritual practice so we can learn how to be, how to have individuation, to undergo the process of individuation. But I do think that tribalism does serve to further in its own right as well.
I agree. Yeah, I think it's like saying like, well, everybody should be hungry or everybody should be full. It's like, well, sometimes you're hungry and sometimes you're full. You're full after you eat food, but then you become hungry again. You can't really separate one from the other. It's transient. It shifts like water. And so, yeah, exactly. I think that's a great way to put it, is that um, it like a pattern, like a heat map of the collective unconscious would be like a few people, individuation, like that process. Suddenly it blows up and then everybody is, and then it kind of fades. It's like a heartbeat, like it shifts and grows. I think because of that, that's how we can determine sort of that pendulum that swings. Like sometimes it's on, sometimes it's off, sometimes it's moving this way, sometimes it's moving that way. But yes, it is all important. There is, and it's so funny to me because to that point, to your point as well, Thelema, which is very individualistic, has an orthodox, they call it like their, what is the word that they use? The body of their church. They have a liturgical, they have priests that have the lineage back to Aleister Crowley and then his ancestors or whatever. And because of that, they take that very seriously. That's their high church, kind of like how Catholics do. But at the same time, it's funny because it's like then the new Thelemites want to make a movement where they take Crowley out of Thelema because he's too much of a high church type. And it's just funny because it's like kind of like shooting yourself in the own foot, so to speak. Maybe that's not a good metaphor, but where he was so individualistic, telling people to think for themselves, that even his church telling people to think for themselves cannot stand.
It's kind of poetic, but I think those people are retarded in the same light because in the same breath, I understand what they're doing, but I do think it's retarded as well because that's like the same thing. It's like people who are like, oh, the art isn't the artist, right? You can separate the art from the artist. It's like, oh well, I don't
Yeah.
listen to Kanye West. I mean, I listen to Kanye West, but what are you like? What are you talking about? Like, you can't have the apple without realizing that it came from the apple tree. You know what I mean? Like,
Yes, exactly. We can only do that because of the obliviousness and the ignorance that come from this stagnancy, the like repeated prosperity that we have. We have so much of a good thing. We have so much food and resources and abundant energy that we get to say stupid shit like that. Like that. I think those two go hand in hand. But that's the reason why Thelema came to be in the first place, is because this is the Aeon of Horus, where we have the capacity to be drunken and Dionysian. That's the way the stars have aligned to where this is the epoch we're shifting into. It's to the point you were making earlier about the reconciliation of paradox. And it is so strange. It's a very new question that we have to answer in this epoch about how we address things like this. It is such a weird time. And it is such a provocative and I want to say unprecedented, but that sounds like Dr. Fauci kind of language. But yeah. You get what I'm saying. You get what I'm saying. You guys know.
we
But
can all agree that there are some people that have existed on this earth that we can all collectively come to the agreement that they are evil, right? Like Epstein was evil. Nowadays, it's kind of 50-50 on Hitler, but I would consider Hitler to be evil. I think he kind of went out of line a little bit. Um, um, Netanyahu's evil. There's certain people that are evil, right? There's just certain evil people on Earth. I would consider what Genghis Khan did to be a little evil, right?
sure.
But I can look at somebody like Charles Manson and Ted Kaczynski and humanize them and say, they're a little neurotic, they're a little crazy, they took things to extremes. I can identify their neurosis within their psyche that caused them to act insane. And I can actually sympathize it, and I can say, oh, maybe under a different set of circumstances, I could have become radicalized like this. I feel like that's a way of identifying the shadow within yourself. The collective human psyche, the collective shadow within all of humanity. Like Carl Jung said, we are the great danger, and these darkness within your own self. If you I'm trying to like make this not sound schizophrenic.
Good luck.
We all have the capability to do what an outsider would consider evil, right? Like there's this comic like Killing Joke. It's like a Batman comic. I know this is like cliche to bring up, but in that comic there's like most people are only one bad day away from doing something that they would normally consider to be immoral, right?
Uh-huh.
Because we have this like sin. I do agree with Christianity. We have a sinful nature within us, and to deny sin altogether is a denial of truth. Because sin is a part of us. It's a part of our blood. We can miss the mark. That's what the original Hebrew word for sin is, missing the mark. Um,
Hmm.
and we can all do this. And if we deny this, and we look at a figure like Crowley or whoever who had darkness within him, and did make a few mistakes in his life, and you just completely deny him as a human, you're not actually doing the alchemy. You're spiritually bypassing. In my opinion, I think that's spiritual bypassing.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I like the idea of the collective shadow. Um,
I mean, think of
yeah.
it, right?
Mhm.
Common
Hmm.
consensus of World War II. How did Hitler get so many people to exterminate Jews and gypsies, right? The gypsies too. How did he do it, right? A lot of people believed what he was saying, and a lot of people there. It was a collective shadow. In Japan as well, when Japan invaded China in the I can't say the word blank of Nanjing, right? I don't know if I can
Hmm.
say the R word. Um, how did so many Japanese people do something that's so inhuman? Like how could you convince so many people to do such horrible things?
Right.
Right.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's a myriad there. It's a myriad of people, of many different people who are all acting on this collective shadow. I assume that you're describing. And they want to then place the blame after they're held accountable. They say, well, I was just following orders. I was just doing this. It's like, nah, you liked it a little bit, bro. Be honest.
Yeah. Pedal Teeth said, okay, she said, what if you're 50% alien human hybrid? Should we worship the tall whites or create a new religion? I don't know. That's like the realism belief, right? I don't know. Sin can be
Yo, bro knows ball. That's crazy. Yeah, that's funny. Yes. I was just
sin
thinking
can
about
be
him. That's funny.
realism.
Yeah, I saw a documentary on Netflix about that guy. It was really funny. But
Yeah,
yeah,
they
yeah,
like
no.
believe they're like aliens or something.
I think the only good UFO cult was Heaven's Gate. I think that was the only most sincere religious movement that came out of that whole breath. That came out of that whole like zeitgeist, like that expression of the idea that there was a great other, like a great mothership that was waiting. I think that they were genuinely sageful people who genuinely believed in a genuine message. They didn't funnel money, they didn't extort anyone. Everybody knew what to expect and everybody went on the mission. I think that Raelianism or whatever, I know that he is like an extortionist. I know he funnels money. So I see that. I'm just like, man, like you could have had it so good. Like, why do they always do that? Why do they always fucking ruin it? Where they start to do like passing around that, the Catholic basket with the money in it. It's like, give us your money so that we can build a UFO. It's like, nah, dude, chill. Please chill. Just,
Yeah, yeah. She said, Madison. I don't know if she wants me to name doctor. Yeah, she said, they did the first human cloning.
I heard that they tried to, but I think that was the big scandal, though, was that they wanted to raise funds to do that, but they were actually just spending it on like houses and stuff, though, right? Unless I had the wrong idea, but I was pretty sure that was part of the Netflix documentary was basically how like they were raising funds to build a UFO, and then they were raising funds to start cloning people, and then there was like some other I forget what. Yeah, but correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah. Um, I don't know if it's true or not, but it reminds me of the Zorro Ranch. You know the Epstein thing, the Zorro Ranch.
Yeah, what's the deal with that? I don't know too much about it.
He was trying to like selectively breed like babies. He was like impregnated a bunch of women and like he was trying to like use genetic engineering and like create like perfect babies and stuff. I heard this theory that he like injected he like he was like in cahoots with Fauci and he like got like a little snippet of his DNA to go into like all the COVID vaccines so he could get like this weird sense of like he's inside of everyone.
I would not be surprised.
Dude, that's
I
like
genuinely would
that's
not.
like some James Bond supervillain shit.
Yeah, for real. Where are the James Bonds who are going and fucking killing people like that? That's insane. I really hope that's not true.
You know, we live in a kind of lame timeline when we have James Bond villains, but no James Bond, bro. That shit's trash.
Yeah, right? For real. Type shit, bro.
Anytime there's like a potential James Bond, he gets like immediately like murked by the deep state.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like yeah, John Kiriakou was pretty close, but he might also be like in it, you know. Yeah.
I think they're letting him because he's doing like good PR for the CIA because he's making them seem like unserious. And he's there.
Uh,
He also probably can't say everything. I think that he does have some restrictions.
hmm. Yeah. I believe it. I do. I believe it. I bet they cut a deal with him, you know, or whatever. He'd be stupid not to take a deal like that.
Yeah,
Well, how are we doing
yeah.
on time?
There's like an eternal archetype of like the martyr that just like dies. He's like, and the secret evil villain is, and then like a blow dart goes in his neck. And he's like, ah. And the secret evil mega doodoo villain is bang 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 ah. He falls off a fucking cliff like in a Disney movie.
47 cruise missiles. Yeah.
Yeah. 47 cruise missiles versus one true killed based QAnon nigga. Sorry.
Yeah, yeah.
I got a
It's
sense
true. It's true. Well,
I'm sorry,
man.
sorry.
No, you're good. It is late. I've got work tomorrow. It's 11:30. I was just about to wrap it up. Do you have any final thoughts, Mr. Gabe, dreamers of the new Aeon, of a way that we can wrap up these discussions, put them in a box, and put wrap a bow around it?
I mean, you can download it and then like take some like snippets, like the snippets where I don't say anything schizo and like potentially bannable, and then post them if you want, like but like back in the day.
I will. Yeah, I was thinking about that, but I just mean for us to wrap up the live stream. You have any final thoughts?
Good health, salutations, positivity, and joy and abundance to all souls.
Joy and abundance to all souls. That's right. The best,
Every soul, no
the
matter
best
who
of
you
the
are,
kingdom.
no matter what your race, ethnicity, place on the earth is, may you have a blessed night and God loves you.
God loves you. That's so sweet. Thank you, Gabe. It has been a pleasure as always. I'm looking forward to talking to you again soon. Everybody, I hope you sleep well. Thank you for hanging out so long. Who made it to the end? Got
Two
Madison
people.
and Gabe, the A team. All right. All right.
Okay.
Well, I'll talk to you guys later.
All right. See you later. Take care.
See
Good
ya.
night.
Bye.